All right. So I'm supposed to say something, right? Um, I always feel it a bit strange in these events because I think each one of us, would have something to share. Each one of you would have something to share. So each one of us, we have our own wisdom that we cultivated through our life's experience, right? So it's not because you listening that you don't have also each one of you could have something very wonderful to share. And I would also learn tremendously from what you have to say. So I think, yeah, we all have this inner uh, Buddha nature, and we all have from there spring forth some wisdom. Each one of us, we have wisdom that comes from our insight, our experience of life. And each one of us, we have love and compassion in our heart. So in that sense, we're all same. One thing that when we watch the world, when we look at the news, we see so much problem, right? We see so much war and conflict and arrogance and greed. And sometimes it can lead to some kind of discouragement. When you see the world that it's not improving, if the history books are true, over time, there has always been war, there has always been conflict and greed and so forth. And the century passes and we don't seem to evolve very much, collectively. But sometimes His Holiness make the comment, you see all these things that come in the news, we always speak about the negative side, but there's also a lot of positive happening. But because there's more positive happening in the world, we don't speak, it doesn't make news. One doesn't speak about those things because it's normal. So we speak about the outrageous things, the uncomfortable thing happening in the world, because these are news, it's not common, right? So sometimes we should have newspaper about good news, not only bad news. Because I think there's a lot of good thing happening in the world, but one doesn't hear so much about it. But you see, when you look at the world, it's also a reflection of what's happening in our own mind. No? So in our own mind, there's conflict, there's greed, there's arrogance. So all what's manifested in the outer world, you also find in your own mind. So in our own mind, there's goodness, right? There's love, compassion, and patience, and goodwill, But there's also greed, arrogance, anger, and negative emotions arising, right? So depending on how you look at yourself, it's like looking at a glass of water. The glass of water, you can see it as half full or half empty, right? It's the same glass, but depending on how you look at it, you have a different image of it. So same thing when you look at yourself. You can look at yourself as the glass half empty, and you watch at all the mistakes you have, all the problems you have, all the negative emotion. You say, how can I ever get anywhere? And then sometimes you focus on the half empty, on the half full, and you say, oh, but I have this precious human life, and I have a good heart, and I have these friends, and I do this, I have some good heart, I help these people, and so forth. So you focus on the positive, right? So on our spiritual journey, you deal with your mind as a whole, and sometimes you focus on the half empty and sometimes on the half full. I think when one comes from a secular perspective, one has this idea that the mind is the brain, and then you have all these thoughts and emotions that are created by the brain. And that's the whole mind. And then if one comes from a more Christian perspective, one has this image that, there's some, from a primordial sin, one has, one is something negative in oneself, and then one has to be saved, we're taking refuge in the Savior, one's sins are cleansed and one goes close to God, things like that. So when I first met Buddhism, so there's a different perspective. So Buddha taught that we have Buddha nature, that fundamentally our mind is pure. You see, fundamentally our mind is clean. And it has always been like that since beginningless time, right? So innately, our mind is beautiful. Innately, our mind is loving. So it's a very different perspective from the materialist or from the Christian perspective. So the Buddha taught that for a number of reasons. One is to help us to overcome our discouragement on our spiritual journey. You see, that fundamentally it's not like we have to discover something new. No, our beauty is inside us. It's more we have to uncover the veil that prevents us from recognizing it. And also, as we have this Buddha nature or Buddha potential, this clear-like nature of the mind, so has each and every other living being. You see, so has your partner, your children, your parents, your friends, your colleagues, and even the people in the world that do crazy things. You see, they also have this Buddha nature. And if you focus on that, it's easier, how to say, to overcome our arrogance, our feeling of superiority. So each and everyone has this Buddha potential. And from Buddha's perspective, even animals, even insects, and other forms of life, whoever has a mind, whoever is sentient, has this Buddha nature and this Buddha potential. And one day they will become Buddha, one day they will become fully enlightened. And also, if you focus a little bit on Buddha nature, you see, so this basic goodness, in this basic goodness, there's love, there's loving kindness, there's compassion. So as you have this Buddha nature, all other people have it too. So there's a basic goodness in all of us. And by focusing on that, it removes your, how to say, self-preoccupation. You see, we so much focus on oneself. But if you connect with your Buddha nature, so it's easier to connect with the Buddha nature of other people and to be more open-hearted. So the question is how can we get in touch with this Buddha nature? How can we awaken it? Throughout the day, you see, sometimes we have good emotion, sometimes we have negative emotion, sometimes we're stressed, sometimes we're anxious, sometimes we're tired, sometimes we're overworked, and other time we are more peaceful, more gentle. So how, you see, our mind is not always good or always bad or always in this or that emotion. Throughout the day, we go through a whirlwind of changes all the time, you know. So I think an example of our computer, you know, when our computer gets stuck, you know, then you start, you know, you turn it off and you start fresh, you reboot it, right? So I think in our day, myself, you know, in a day, I reboot my mind maybe 20, 30 times, you know. You, your mind gets stuck in certain work you do, certain stress or certain negative emotion, then you have to reboot, you have to go back to the clear nature of your mind. You have to go back to your inner purity. You know, you have to get out of that stress, out of that tiredness, out of that fog, out of that negative emotion. You have to reconnect to your Buddha nature. You have to reconnect to your inner beauty, right? So if one takes the example of a sky, you know, so the nature of the sky is to be blue, is to be clear, right? But then clouds form within it, right? And then sometimes even thunderstorm, right? But it never affects the basic nature of the sky to be clear, right? So at some point the clouds will dissipate and the sky is again seen. So it's same thing with our mind. You see, our mind is basically clean and pure and calm and loving, right? But then certain energy manifests within the mind, and it becomes overclouded, right? It becomes uh, with a lot of wind, with a lot of turbulence, with a lot of concept, thought, that project, that interprets the world around oneself, that interprets oneself, you know, who I am, who I'm supposed to be, how I react. So all these things manifest in our mind. So how do you reset? You see, how do you come to your basic cleanness, to your basic clarity? So I think in the world, usually we all have our ways of doing that, right? So for example, when you're stressed, you know, and you overwork, you know, your mind goes crazy. What do you do? You know, you go for a walk, right? You have to get out of your house. You have to get out of your flat. So you go for a walk. And that calms down your mind, right? You go to a park or you go to watch a sunset, and then your mind slows down. Or you take a shower, right? Or you take a bath, and that helps, right? I think one thing that one does that one shouldn't do so much is to go on social media or go watch a movie, you know, turn on Netflix or things like that. Because yes, it numbs your mind, it gets you out of the problem, but by hypnotizing you into something. So it doesn't actually, how to say, put the mind back in a neutral state, in a peaceful state. So Lama Yeshe used to say, you see, instead of doing this kind of activity, it's actually better to go to sleep. Because if you sleep, actually it refreshes your body, it refreshes your mind. You know, so better to go to sleep than to watch movie till midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning. You know, better go to sleep. So I think one helpful thing is to come back when the mind thinks a lot, you know, is to bring back the mind in the present moment, right? So to do things mindfully, you know, to move your body mindfully, slowly, you know, like in Qigong or these kind of things. So you can do Qigong with, you know, washing your dishes or moving from one place to another. Become mindful to your body. So in Tantra, one would put the awareness of on one's light energy body and try to feel, when you move your body, you try to feel bliss, you know. And then whatever you see, you try to see in its purity as light energy producing bliss. So this is a way to bring you back to the present moment, to your inner purity. Another method is to watch the breath, right? Is to become mindful of your inhale, exhale. So for example, when one sits down, one way of doing it is to put the emphasis on the exhale. So you inhale light and you exhale deeply, thinking you push out your dark energy, your dark thought, your negative energy, you know, your worries, your stress. So you exhale that. And you do what? 3 or 5, 7 breaths like that, and you see a difference. Or you do the 9-round breathing. So it's the same thing, but imagining 3 channels within your body. And you, again, you exhale the negative energy, and it centers your energy inside the central channel, in the center of your body. And your consciousness, your mind becomes more subtle. And that more subtle level of consciousness, the thoughts are too gross to function there, right? So it calms your mind like that. Another practice that is useful is that of rejoicing. You know, you see, when the mind is negative, when the mind is stressed, it tends to focus on the negative, right? So to counterbalance that, you focus on the positive. You see, you focus on what you have, you know, the friends you have, you know, you have food, you have a body, you're healthy, you have mind, you can think about Dharma, you can study, you can develop positive emotion. So, and you can think about all what you have done so far in your life positively. So this is very helpful, you know, to connect to your inner beauty, to your inner, how to say, your inner decencies. You know, as a human being, we are a decent human being when you focus on your positive side. And then you think about the positive things in the life of your friends, you know, your partner, your children, your parents. Look at the side of their goodness, no? And same thing of all living beings like that, no? And then the higher spiritual beings of the past, present. Someone focus on the goodness that is in the world. And by doing so, it awakens your inner goodness. You see, thoughts and emotion are vibrations, right? So if you attune at a certain level of vibration in yourself, you attune at the same level of vibration and thought in other people. And then, of course, practices that we have is the practice of taking refuge, and Guru Yoga in our tradition is an easy way to connect with the inner beauty. You see, sometimes connecting to one's own inner beauty is kind of very hidden behind all these thoughts and emotions. We have difficulty to access them in ourselves. But if you focus them on an outer person, it's easier. You know, if you focus on the quality of His Holiness Dalai Lama or of Shakyamuni Buddha or of Chenrezig or things like that, it's easier because somehow one doesn't see any mistakes there like one sees in ourselves. So by looking at the out, thinking and reflecting on the quality of a higher being, so by focusing on that energy in the outer being, it as a mirror, it awakens the same quality in you. So when I'm thinking of His Holiness Dalai Lama, you see, so in the morning, to turn one's mind towards spirituality is to, if you have images of enlightened beings in your room, you know, so by focusing on them, not just looking them as like, you know, normal picture, but you think about the quality of the mind of these beings, you see? So instead of starting the day in an ordinary way by focusing on this being and looking at their quality, the quality of their mind, somehow it awakens it as a mirror, it attunes you to this quality in yourself. And then if you make a little offering in front of, out of admiration, you know, you light a candle or an incense stick. So that act of generosity towards this enlightened quality awakens your sense of generosity, your sense of giving, you know, and you becoming closer to these qualities within you. So I think the practice of taking refuge is very, very profound, you know. Is actually to think about the qualities, these enlightened qualities that these beings have developed. They have awakened, they are in touch with their Buddha nature, right? Our Buddha nature is still a little bit veiled, you know. So by focusing on the beings that have developed these qualities, it awakens this quality in you. So His Holiness often says, in the morning, the first things I do is to take refuge, right? So is attuning yourself, what is it? Is attuning yourself to the qualities these beings have developed, these beings you take refuge in have developed. So you put your heart at the level of vibration that in the qualities you see in these beings. And it awakens your aspiration to become like that and to act in a way similar as they do. So His Holiness then, you know, so often one makes an offering in front of the altar in the morning, and then one offers prostration, whether physically, mentally, or through speech. What does that do to yourself? It's like you humbly bow down to these qualities that you wish to develop yourself, right? You say, oh, wow, wow, they made it, I wish to do like them, I wish to become like them, so it's like it removes your arrogance, your self-sufficiency. You're thinking, wow, oh, I'm a self-made man, I'm there. No, you bow down to these qualities and you aspire to develop that. So it's a beautiful gesture, beautiful. And then on that base of being humble, in awe in front of those qualities, then when you sit down, something has happened to your mind. Your mind is calm and receptive for something beautiful to happen. So in Buddhism, there's a lot of practices, there's not time now to go into that, but each practice psychologically has a very deep effect on the mind if you know how it works, the purpose and what it does to the mind. And gradually your mind becomes cleaner and cleaner. And as the mind becomes cleaner, you become happier and happier. So happiness is not something that you have to look for outside. Happiness is something innate in your mind. Once your mind has removed the veil of your affliction, the mind by nature is happy. The mind is peaceful, is joyous, is loving. It's not something you have to look outside. It's the very nature of your mind. What prevents you to live like that is this obscuration, this veil that we have within our mind. And all the spiritual practice, their aim is to remove these veils, right? But one has to know how it works. Is not, how to say, reciting a text is not like a magic formula that will bring this experience in you. It's not like abracadabra and suddenly some magic happen. Mantra don't work like that. It's not like you recite a certain number of mantra and it will clean your mind. No, the recitation has to go with a certain state of mind. You see, it's a complex way in which it works. Just reciting words don't work. For example, you can recite the formula of taking refuge 100,000 times and nothing happens, right? It has to be done in a certain state of mind. You see? Anyway, I think that's enough for today. Because you see, if one goes into practice, it's such a vast world, where one can explore how actually spiritual change happen in our mind gradually, So I think each one of you have those experience of working with your mind, right? So each one of us, that's what's happening, right? We try to understand how these spiritual practices work and transform our mind gradually. So it's a beautiful journey, you see. It's not like there's a formula there that works for everyone. Each one of us is unique, and that's why it says the Buddha taught 84,000 methods, right? So that there's something that fits the mind of each one of us. So what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. And that's true for each one of us. We're all unique, right? So, and the Buddha cannot make this transformation for us, right? So the Buddhas can, and the teachers can only share the method, share how it works for them. And then each one of us, we have to figure out what works for us. And our psychic is unique, but also our environment is unique. you know, our life situation is unique, right? So each one of us, like Lama Yeshe used to say, you know, we have to become our own psychotherapist, right? We have to use this method and use our wisdom to make it work, you know? So it's a beautiful adventure, you know? It's not a one method fits all, right? So good luck.
Thank you, Venerable Rene. Thank you. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, you mentioned about vibration, that if you have a negative vibration, then you pick that up from others. And I was thinking about anxiety, because I get a lot of anxiety, and even preparing for this webinar, I was getting very anxious and nervous, and I thought, who's getting anxious and nervous? Why am I getting anxious? People aren't tuning in for me, they're tuning in for Rene. But where does that come from, that anxiety, and what's the best antidote have you found for when you get nervous or anxious like that?
I think one thing is that, how to say, our vision of the world and ourselves is kind of solidified. You see, the sense of self is something solid. Our body is solid. Our thoughts are solid. The world around us is solid. But actually, when you start looking, but where is the I that is anxious? Where is the body? Where are the thoughts? Where are the other people, and so forth? You see, if you start looking where things are, do they exist in this solid way? Then you start touching a little bit how things are essenceless. You know, the I, the self, has no essence. You know, the thoughts, you know, the stress, the anxiety, where is it? So the anxiety works because there's a strong sense of self, you know. So what helps me is to, but you see, emptiness or dependent rising, or which is the final solution to our anxiety, is actually, it works when you're focusing on that quite often throughout the day. Then when the anxiety starts arising, you can catch it, right? So when the anxiety is there, emptiness doesn't seem to work very much. At our level, that antidote is not powerful enough, right? Because the anxiety is already flared up, and then it doesn't work. So I think for me, what works is that, remember that all things we do are not so important. Recently, I lost my brother. He died in an accident. And then I start reflecting on all and he was doing work and things like that. And then, anyway, but many people in the world do things that are so important, and then they pass away, and somebody else has to continue their work. So all things we do, it's important to us, but ultimately it's not so important. We die and somebody else continue what we do, right? And then recently, you know, I lost quite a number of my friends, and I wonder, where are they now? You know, and one day I will disappear and the world continues without me. So all the actions we do, all the activity we do, all our place in the world will go on without us. And even the people which love us, you see, that after a while they will forget about us and life goes on. So for me, I think impermanence helps, to think, oh, all these things that I think are so important, they're actually not so important in the big picture. Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you so much. May I ask something else?
Sure.
So in my meditation, I feel like it goes well and I'm happy and I'm mindful or trying to be and do my breathing meditation, my practice. Then I get up from my cushion and I have a conflict with my partner or my child. And then I think, oh, my meditation is failing or I'm not doing it properly. Can you say something about how do you merge what you're trying to do in your cushion with your daily life? Can you say anything about that?
I think this is a very, very good question, very interesting. I think when one ends the meditation, one important point is the motivation. When one moves away from the cushion, is already projecting, seeing what's going to happen, imagining what's going to happen, and try to make a motivation, or I'm going to deal with that with loving kindness. I will try to be mindful moment by moment what thought arise and so forth. So by making a motivation, an intention of how you're going to react as you move on, this helps, this is one thing that helps. And then the second thing is then when one moves out of the cushion, to stop the meditation before you're tired, so you stop at the time where you could meditate 10 minutes more. So you stop at the point where your meditative state is still there. And then as you move, you do it a little bit very gently. You try to stay in that state of mind. No? So if you have meditated on loving kindness, if you finished with loving kindness, dedicating for all sentient being, you say, now I'm going to move to help all sentient beings, so I'm going to help all sentient beings, and within all sentient being is my partner, is my child. They are part of all sentient beings, so they are the one that I'm gonna help, so I think these two things, the motivation why one moves, and then the second thing is try to keep the energy of the meditation. As you move out of your meditating, you try to keep that awareness, whether it is love, compassion, whether it is emptiness, whether it is impermanence, whether it is seeing everything in their purity. Whatever you finish the meditation with that, you try to keep it as you move away from the cushion. So first, you see, you might have meditated with the eyes closed. So you try to keep that state of mind while you open your eyes and you sit on your cushion. You try to remain with that awareness. And then as you stand up, you try to maintain that awareness. And before you go out of your meditation room, you try to keep that awareness. You open the door and you go out, you try to keep that awareness. Whatever positive state of mind you have meditated on, you try to keep that as you move on, and gradually you will see you can remain in that state of mind longer and longer. So at the beginning, it will last until the first thought of what happens next come, and then already everything gets washed away, right? But gradually you can keep that longer and longer. So, so you stand up as the deity, you go out as the deity, you try to see everything as the mandala and everything as bliss and void and things. So you can keep that. Or love and compassion, doing Tonglen, you meditate on Tonglen, putting on the movement of the breath. So as you keep on going out and you keep on breathing, you continue to do Tonglen, right? Or emptiness, see everything as senseless, So whatever meditation you did on the cushion, you try to keep that going while you move out. And then throughout the day, you try, when you have a moment of a break, you go back there, So for example, myself, what I like to do, morning, I try always to come back to bodhicitta, to love and compassion. And the afternoon, I try to come back always on emptiness, right? So kind of like that. So you have to find something that works for you, and when you have a break, to come back there, and then you integrate, gradually you integrate more and more your everyday life.
Thank you. That's really very helpful. Does anybody have a question for Venerable Rene from our audience? Please raise your hand or drop it into the chat. Do we have any questions? Quite difficult to see so many people. If not, can I ask you a question, Venerable Rene, about depression? So throughout my life, I've struggled with periods of depression. Do you have any suggestions for an antidote when depressed states of mind come?
I mean, depression is an emotion, and usually an emotion is brought about by a stream of thoughts. So one has to try to recognize the stream of thought that brought about that emotion, right? Is it low self-esteem? Is it being overwhelmed by a situation? Is it a feeling of being stuck, or sometimes it can be a mood, sometimes depression. For example, when I did long retreat, what I noticed that the first 6 months, your states of mind, your moods are very much connected to memories from this life. But then you reach a point where your life is quite okay, you're happy with what you're doing, with your practice, with your retreat, but you have this mood that is there and you don't see any cause, right? So you cannot pinpoint to what brought that state of mind about, right? So then you can infer it's something that comes from previous lives, right? So it's a mood that is there, is some ripening of some negative karma or for some negative thing from past life. And you have just to accept that you have to go through that. So you keep on doing your positive thing, and somehow with time that will be cleaned, So put more emphasis on purification aspect of practice, and this was gradually being cleaned away. So I think it's try to figure out the stream of, if there are stream of thought that bring about that low state of mind or not, if there's nothing that you can pinpoint in your life, so you can infer that it's come from before, right? And then the only method that is left there is to purify, is to try to imagine negative karma past life and do whatever purification practice you do and put emphasis on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have a question from Jeff. Jeff, would you like to ask a question? If you unmute, thank you.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Ven Rene, for your insights and wisdoms. Good to see you again. Hopefully it's not a too difficult of a question, but I was thinking about what you were saying, that happiness is innate in our minds. And I've been working with about 4 non-Buddhists, and we've been trying to run some workshops to help other non-Buddhists to create happiness in their lives. But I think that for non-Buddhists, having this innate happiness might be difficult for them to understand. Whereas from a Buddhist, I think conceptually we understand that this is possible. So how to convey this message that we have happiness within ourselves to a non-Buddhist?
Well, I think if something comes from the Christian background, I think there's this belief of Christ nature, you know, or of godly nature, or so. So I think there's also a belief in a fundamental goodness somewhere, right? But if you come from a materialistic point of view, where it's only the brain and this body, you know, and your mind is a product of your body, then it's more difficult. You know, you don't have that ground. But then I think one way to approach is to see that, you see, there are certain emotions, then when we cultivate them, we are happier than other, right? So if we develop a basic ethical perspective on life, you know, not harming other, so try to be content, try to deal with other with loving kindness, with decency. So it brings peace to our mind, it brings joy, you know. So simply by cultivating wholesome state of mind, it brings some kind of inner peace and inner joy, inner happiness. So I think by the approach, by cultivating positive thoughts, you know, and I think sometimes positive thought is not necessarily needed. It's interesting. In one prayer of calling the Guru from afar, Lama Zopa Rinpoche translates something like the thought of no need. You know, cultivating the thought of no need. You know, we think often that happiness comes from having, from acquiring, from doing. But actually, happiness comes from when you don't need anything, when you're happy. You know, when you don't need anything, you know, if some people ask, what can I do for you? What do you need? Well, I don't need anything. I'm fine. You know, in that no need, there's joy, there's happiness. Oh, I don't need anything, you know? So I think the feeling of contentment, of joy comes when you don't need anything, when there's no, people cannot pull string, you know, you're happy, you know. So I think those which have been around Lama Zopa Rinpoche, it's quite amazing. You see, when you see a being that doesn't have any need, he doesn't even need warm clothes when it's cold. He doesn't need to drink. He doesn't need to eat. The mind doesn't have any need. He's content. He's happy. So I think this, in everyday life, to notice all the needs you have, you know, and try to see, but actually, do I really need that? You know, you know, sometimes we are in this frenzy of acquiring more object. You know, you go shopping and, you know, your mind gets, how to say, attracted to this and that. But then, do I really need those things? And often when one does retreat, one realizes that one doesn't actually need a lot. You know, and sometimes when you give things away, you realize that you're happier than with all the things that clutters your space. No. So I think there's two ways: cultivating positive emotion and also giving up, you know, giving up, letting go of one's attachment, letting go of one's need. And there's peace, there's joy when you're just happy to be, you know, discover the beauty of existing, of being, and that you don't need anything, you know. you have the clothes you wear, you have food to eat. That's all what you need. Anyway, that's my point of view.
Thank you. Thank you, Venerable Rene. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have about 5 minutes left, and I wonder if you would lead us in a meditation before the session ends. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. We will try to put it into practice. Thank you.
So let the energy settle. Just bring the mind home inside. And then in the space in front of you, imagine something or someone that inspires you, whether His Holiness Dalai Lama or the Buddha or Chenrezig or any holy being that inspires you. And you imagine him or her in a body of light, or can be Tara. So you imagine him or her in a body of light, and you imagine him or her in the bodies, each cell of his or her body fuses with love and compassion that pours towards you. And his or her mind is completely blissful, completely joyous, like burst out laughing, completely blissed out, yet completely loving and compassionate. And as you inhale, you imagine inhaling light coming from his or her heart into you. And with each inhale, more light is inhaled. And that light has the same quality of bliss, joy, laughter, love, compassion. And with each inhale of light, your own body, each cells of your body mind, become in the nature of that bliss, joy, light, love, compassion. And then whatever light, bliss, joy, love, compassion that has been awakened in you, So you keep on inhaling that, and as you exhale, you radiate that out. You radiate out these qualities. You radiate light, bliss, joy, love, compassion in your room, in the people that are in the room with you, or the people that you're going to meet when you leave. So you send love, compassion, joy, laughter, bliss to the people you are going to meet. So you inhale light and you share that light. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Renee. Thank you to the interpreters. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.